I like to try and give value to people as much as I can. And one way of doing that is being able to share these workshops with other people. So if it's okay with you, I'll record this event. However, if afterwards you're not comfortable about appearing on that video, I can edit you out afterwards. So if you're not comfortable with that, just drop me an email and I can edit you out, no problem at all. So on to a little bit about me. I think most of you know at least something about me. I think, Lisa, is your audio working now? I just want to say hi. Oh, don't know if you can hear me, Lisa. Not to worry. So I think probably everybody except Fenny's at least had a conversation with me, but you may not know some of my backstory, so I'll just tell you a little bit about how I ended up doing what I'm doing now and what hurdles I had to overcome to do that as well. So has anybody ever had one of those moments where they realise that things have to change or that you need to do something differently in your life? I'm sure at least at some point we might have had one of those moments. And for me, I'd had quite a successful career as a project manager for several years. And I think most people from the outside probably thought I was doing really successfully, really happy in my job. But I think as time went on, I realised that I wasn't happy in what I was doing. And I think people around me thought that I'd got my stuff together and that everything was hunky-dory, that people used to think I was confident, that I would just get on with things, I was competent at what I was doing, and most people probably thought I was happy with what I was doing. But nothing could be further from the truth, really. I was miserable in my job most days. I enjoyed what I did, but it wasn't really fulfilling. And I'd always got this underlying anxiety, feeling of not being good enough that was just underpinning kind of everything. And I spent most of my time worried that people were going to find me out and find out that I couldn't actually do the things they thought I could, and that my managers and my colleagues would find out that I was actually a fraud. So I spent most of my time actually doing that. And I thought that was going to be it, that I was going to be stuck like that forever, not have any confidence, always have these horrible beliefs about myself, and just generally feel awful and unsatisfied. But I'd always had a yearning to help people, and I'd tried lots of things in the past, but never actually did anything with them. So I tried everything, like to become a Reiki practitioner, to be a Bowen technique therapist, and even considered training as a nurse at one point. And I also trained as an aromatherapist. But the beliefs that I had about myself kind of underpinned everything and stopped me actually making progress. So I worried about whether people were going to actually show up, if they would want to make appointments with me, whether I had this worry about people paying me for a service. All sorts of issues kept cropping up, so I just didn't actually get going with any of it. And then I started to hear about a career called a coach. And the more I found out about it, the more excited I got. And it seemed like something I wanted to do, where you help people move forward with their lives and achieve what they actually want to get out of life. And I really wanted to help women with confidence issues, so people who were just like me. And I've been told that you didn't need qualifications to be a coach, although I may disagree with that now. So I did everything, like got my business cards, got a website set up, all those kind of things, and thought I was ready to go. And then nothing happened, because I was actually too afraid to even talk to people about what I did. So you're not going to get any clients or help people if you're actually too afraid to even talk to somebody. So it was then I had this massive realization that I needed to clear up my own stuff before I could help anybody else, because there'd be nothing worse than a coach who'd got absolutely no confidence in herself, then trying to tell somebody else how to be confident. There's definite incongruence there. So I did some research and was determined to make some changes, because I thought there had to be a solution to get me out of the state I was in, where I was just feeling not confident. And I found out about this thing called NLP that somebody recommended to me. So I did the training, and during that training, you clear a lot of your stuff up because you're using all of the techniques that I now use in my coaching. And I got myself a coach and just worked on my mindset. So that's how I arrived where I am today. And just to give you an idea of how underconfident I was, the thought of actually doing a workshop online to a group of people would have absolutely petrified me about 3.5 years ago. So the fact that I can sit here comfortably and wanting to actually talk to you guys rather than trying to hide away is just to give you an idea of how far I've come. So that's just a little bit about me. So on to tonight's workshop. So we're going to be talking about self-sabotage and how you can overcome that. So we'll understand what it actually is, where it can come from, and then take you through some ways of changing it, preventing it, some strategies to actually deal with it. So does all that sound good? Yep. Okay. Oh, I thought Sheetal had turned up. So hi, Julia and Sheetal. Nice to see you. And Alia, good to see you again. So tonight's about me giving you value, and just to put your minds at rest, because I know often we can turn up to these kind of workshops, because I've been to them, where the presenter spends half the time trying to sell you a new product or a new service. So that's not what tonight's about. It's just about giving you value and giving you practical techniques that you can actually take away with you. Okay, so you can just relax and enjoy the event knowing that it's just going to be all about you guys. Okay, I do have 3 requests though. One is, if you can, please stay until the end, because I know you'll get huge value from it. If for any reason you do need to leave early, that's absolutely fine, and you're very welcome to come to a future event that I hold. Secondly, be coachable. So let me share with you some new ideas that you may not have come across before. And I liken this to, say, I suggest that you try on a new jacket that's a style or a colour that you've never tried before. And you won't know if it's going to suit you until you actually try it on, take a look in the mirror, have a look, see how it looks. So I just invite you to sort of embrace new concepts and see if they might work for you, even if it feels like it might not straight away. And lastly, just be present and interactive. So if anybody else who hasn't got their camera on at the moment is comfortable to switch that on, that would be lovely. So I much prefer talking to people's faces than a sea of names. And again, one thing I would invite you to do is, sometimes it's good to actually push ourselves outside of our comfort zone a little bit. So if you're feeling less than comfortable about turning your camera on, then just know that you're in good company with a nice bunch of people. And even if you've got your rollers in or there's a pile of ironing in the background, I really don't care. I'd much rather see your lovely faces. So if you feel comfortable doing that, would be great. Okay, so before we get into the main part of the workshop, I thought it would be nice for you guys to get to know each other a little bit better. So I'm just going to put you into a breakout room. So is everybody who's been on Zoom before familiar with breakout rooms? I'll break you into groups. Yes, you have, Sheetal, shut up. So be 2 groups of, oh, someone's disappeared. Okay, that makes it easier. That'll be 4 groups of 2. So I'll put you into a breakout room, and what I'd like you to do is just introduce yourselves to each other, say whereabouts in the UK or the world, wherever you are, just to get to know each other a little bit better. And then also just say what it is you want to get out of this evening's workshop. So you might have an idea of what it is you want to get out of it. So just sort of share that with each other. And I will give you about 4 or 5 minutes to do that, just so you can break out into a room. Okay. So I will do that now. And we'll see you all shortly. So have a nice time. Oh, that's not good. It's going to need to be, sorry. It's all right, there's going to be one person in a room on her own, which I know Sian's experienced that before. It's not fun, is it? Okay, we'll do that again. So there's 2 groups of 2 and a 3. See you all shortly then. Welcome back, everybody. How was that? I suddenly realised afterwards that Sheetal and Suji, you'd been introducing yourselves to each other. Hopefully you kind of know each other already, but that's fine. So, you're right, Sheetal.
Oh yeah, I was going to say I was with Pip.
Okay, it said your mum was there as well, but Suji was there as well.
Oh, was you there?
Yeah, I was there.
Oh,
it's okay. I was just listening what you had to say.
Oh my gosh, okay. Well, nice
You're
to
on your
meet
own,
you.
Mother, that's dreadful.
She wasn't on the screen. I'm so sorry, Mum.
I'm not sure about all this, which one to press as well. So I wasn't sure. Yeah.
I think might need a Zoom lesson then. That's all good. Okay. Good stuff. Okay, so I hope that was a nice exercise to introduce each other, or introduce yourselves to each other. So is anybody happy to share what it is they'd like to get out of tonight's workshop? Anyone feeling brave?
I will.
Thanks, Sam.
I would like to understand when I am self-sabotaging, and recognize when I am and understand why, and just have some techniques to stop me doing it.
Yeah, great. We'll cover that tonight, so that's good. Anybody else got anything they want to get out of this evening? No? Okay.
I've obviously done this workshop back in November, and I want an opportunity to embed, really. So I took lots of notes last time, so I want to sort of add to that and just have the opportunity to revisit it and see how much I've grown and developed from November to this point.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Sian. And also with these things, even if you have attended it before, you might still take something different away from it. I think sometimes when we hear new concepts, you don't pick up on all of it straight away. So hopefully you'll get something maybe a bit different out of tonight as well, because I probably won't talk about exactly the same things. And one thing I would encourage you to do is make this as interactive as possible. So please ask me questions if anything you're not sure about or you want some more information about. I love questions, I like answering them, and it can also give other people insight, because sometimes if you've got a question, you can guarantee that somebody else will have the same question. So you might be doing somebody else a favour by asking that, and we can talk a bit more about it. Okay, thank you for that. So I'm guessing you probably said other things like we said, or just tips and strategies, and even sometimes just knowing that we're not alone, because I spent a long time thinking that it was just me that thought the way I did. But the more people that I come across, the more common that I realised it is. Because I'm sure you've all heard of something called imposter syndrome, where especially in the workplace, where people think that they're not good enough to be where they are, and that people will find them out and discover that they're not the person that they think they are. Okay, so would it be useful to understand where self-sabotage comes from and strategies to get yourself out of it? That'd be good. And I've had many clients who on the outside seem to have it all, and I'm sure, and I'm guessing that when you've been out and about, a lot of people think that you've got it all together and that you're happy and you're confident, and if you're anything like I used to be, on the inside I was the complete opposite. So I'm proof that can change, and so are many of my clients, which is good. So if you think about what you're getting or you're not getting out of life, what sort of challenges are you facing that are stopping you getting what you want out of life? Is anybody happy to share that? No? Okay. So self-sabotage. So firstly, what is it? Well, does anybody want to have a guess to start with what they think self-sabotage might be? Or what their experience of it might be? No worries if not.
I'm just going to say, I suppose it's where someone's maybe complimenting you and you're saying, no, don't be daft, or no, it doesn't look nice, or you put yourself down.
Yeah, so you're rejecting what anybody saying anything nice to you, just rejecting. Yeah. Anybody, anything else?
Not being kind to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a good one. And we'll talk a bit more about how you can get out of that a bit later on. So what self-sabotage basically is, it's the things that we do, think or believe that stop us getting what we want out of life. In a nutshell, that's basically what it is. So it could be things like, if you're wanting to lose weight, you start eating healthily, exercising a lot, and then all of a sudden you'll start getting your own way of doing that. So you'll decide that the weather's too cold to go out running, or that piece of cake in the fridge looks really nice, so you help yourself to it. So we start to lose focus on it, or we just think that we're not capable of achieving the goals that we set ourselves. It could be that if you're looking for a new job, that you just talk yourself out of even just applying for it. It could be if you want to get into a relationship, you actually just avoid going on dates because you're too nervous about going on dates. So there's all these things that we do that get in our own way of us achieving what we want out of life, which isn't a nice place to be, and can often lead us to feel a bit dissatisfied with life if we're not getting what we want. So you might have been, if you do self-sabotage, you might have had people say to you in the past that you tend to shoot yourself in the foot, or that you're your own worst enemy. So if anybody's had those things said to them, I know I have in the past. And it's different to failing. So when we're self-sabotaging, that's not the same thing as failing. So when you're failing, it means that you're doing your absolute best at something, but you're not getting the results that you want. Whereas self-sabotage means that you're actually stopping yourself giving it your all and giving it your best in the first place. So I just wanted to make that distinction between the two. Okay, that makes sense to everybody? Yeah, good. And I was guilty of this. For a long time in my past, I worked, as I said, as a project manager. I was in the NHS, and I would want to go for jobs to move up to the next level and get promotion. But if it involved public speaking, which was my biggest fear, if it involved any kind of public speaking, I would just not apply for it. So I'd kind of shoot myself in the foot before I'd even started. So don't know if that sounds familiar to everybody. So has anybody got their own examples of where they might have done this in the past that they're happy to share? No? Okay. So moving on to, and just welcome Aisha. I've just seen you join. So what causes it? So the sort of things that can cause self-sabotage, we've touched on a couple already. So one is our thinking, or even sometimes overthinking. Sometimes if we think about things too much, we can talk ourselves out of it. It could be our beliefs, so what we believe about ourselves usually. So that thing of if you don't feel good enough or worthy or you deserve things. It could even be our upbringing, which I'll come on to a little bit later on. It could be the family environment that you grew up with can cause a certain way of thinking or some beliefs. It could even be our emotions. If you've got an overwhelm of fear, for example, that can cause things like anxiety, which we'll talk about shortly as well. Imposter syndrome, I've already talked about that. People can have that belief that they're not good enough, and they're worried that people might find them out, which again causes its own anxiety. And even habits, we can often get stuck in a cycle of a behaviour that's not really helping us. And sometimes that can be difficult to break out of, which can then cause us to get in our own way. Okay. So just going through those few things, has that opened up anything for anybody, or has anybody got any insight so far that they want to share? No? Okay. So on to how you can overcome it. The first thing that I want to talk about, which I think we're all guilty of, and I'm occasionally still guilty of this, is our self-talk. So we can often get stuck in negative self-talk, that we can talk ourselves out of things. And if you've ever told yourself that you can't do something, then this is where you can kind of get in your own way about things. So by telling yourself you can't do something, you're already getting in your own way and sabotaging yourself. And another one is try. And I think I might have been talking to somebody about this the other day. So if you've all got a pen on the desk in front of you, for example, which isn't going to help because I can't actually see it, but I want you to try and pick the pen up that's on the table. Okay, so Ali has picked it up, and so has Pip. Yep, so you all picked it up. Okay, so you actually picked it up, so that's not trying to pick it up. So if you put it down again and try to pick it up. Okay, I think you're all kind of getting the idea. So if I've got a pen in my hand and I try to pick it up, I'm not actually doing it. So if I pick it up, I pick it up. But if I'm trying to pick it up, I'm not quite getting there to do it. Does that make sense? Okay. So what I mean by that is if you're trying to do something, it's not the same as actually doing it. And if you think about it, you're actually giving yourself a way out of not doing it. Because if you try and do something and you don't do it, you'll just go, oh, well, I tried. And you didn't kind of overcome every obstacle to actually do it. So it's just to be careful of the language that you use. I'll talk a bit more about language in a second, but if you become very conscious of the language that you use, you can start to see where you're actually causing yourself to get in your own way. That makes sense? Yeah, good. And also saying the way you want it is really important as well, because without knowing it, that, like I said, the language that we use can actually cause us a bit of an issue. So if I was to say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, what have you all just thought of? A pink elephant. So our minds work in a bit of a strange way, because to not think about something, you have to think about it to not think about it. So you're actually bringing that thing into your awareness, whether you like it or not. And I can remember a friend of mine, I think a couple of years back, when I was about to do my first talk in front of a group of people. The day before, he said, "Are you nervous about it?" And I said to him, "Well, I wasn't until you put that thought in my head." So until he'd mentioned the word nervous, that hadn't even entered my consciousness and my thoughts. So it's just to be really careful about the language that you use. And another proof of this, which has actually had some research into it, is you've probably, I don't think they're around so much anymore for a reason, but there used to be these health and safety signs up in areas where there might have been water spillages or something. So there might have been a sign up that said, "Don't slip," or "Careful slip hazard," or something like that. And they actually did some research, and they found that there were more people slipped over the closer they were to the sign, because the sign actually put the thought of slipping into their heads. So it's really interesting how our brains actually process that kind of stuff. And our brains are actually hardwired to do that for survival reasons. And it's always looking for common things and bringing those things that we're thinking about into our awareness more. And that was done back in the days when we lived in caves, so that if you knew the certain kind of berry was poisonous, you'd know to look for the leaves that were on that tree, or the type of berry, or the colour that it was, to avoid it. And it's this, I'm not going to test Sheeta, because I know she should know what this is, but it's something called a reticular activating system, called a RAS. And you would have experienced the RAS before. I call it RAS because it's just much easier to say, in that if you've been looking to buy a certain type of car, you'll start to see that car everywhere. Or if you've had a bad breakup with somebody, you'll start to hear sad songs all the time on the radio and think that they're all sad, but it's just what your brain's focusing on. And I've even had a conversation with a friend about the language that we use. So if anybody has children, this can really help with getting them to behave a lot better. So, for example, if you're walking down the street with your children or somebody else's children, and you said to them, "Don't run in the road," what do you think you've just brought into their awareness? The road, yep. So if you want them to do what, like stay on the pavement, if you want them to do what you want them to do, you need to say it as you want it. So say to them, "Stay on the pavement," because then you're just bringing the pavement into their awareness. And I had somebody that I did some training with, she actually tried this with her kids, because she'd got 6 children. I don't know how the hell she coped, but she had 6 children. And she used to tell them, when she got in the car to go anywhere with them, tell them not to be naughty. So obviously she's bringing being naughty into their awareness. So once she'd learned this, because we were on the same training course where I learned this, that she went away and tried this with her kids, and just turned around to them and said, "I want you to all behave today." And lo and behold, I think they were a bit stunned that she tried a different approach, but they all behaved. So it's just interesting to know and just sort of be aware of the language that you use. So that's language of other people, but you can also be careful of the language that you use with yourself as well. Just another example with children. A friend of mine has a daughter who's really bright academically, and within earshot, my friend said to me, she's doing great at school, but her one failing is that is her spelling. So I winced a bit because I heard the word failing, and politely suggested that she might want to think about saying that she just finds spelling less easy. Because by saying that it was a failure for her, that doesn't really leave her anywhere to go. Does that make sense? Yeah. So by saying you find something less easy, you're just making it sound a bit softer. So you can try this on for yourself. So if you think, if I said to you that you found something difficult, how does that feel? It's not a nice word to use, but does that feel like something that's reachable for you to do if I say something's difficult? No. So if I say to you, you find something less easy, does that sound like a better way of phrasing it? Yeah. So if you start, so even if you're trying to use a negative, try and make it as positive as you can, if that makes sense. Okay. So the first step to making any changes is to bring it into your awareness. So I'm not saying that you're all going to be perfect using the language that you want to use with yourselves to start with. But if you start to notice the language that you're using with yourself on a daily basis, you can then start to see where you might need to make some changes. So if you're constantly saying to yourself, I'll never do that, whatever that is. But if you say, I'm not able to do that yet, that makes it sound like more of a possibility. Does that make sense? So just start to notice the language that you use with yourself, and then start to think how you can actually rephrase that to something a bit more positive and a bit more supportive to you actually achieving things. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. And another useful thing to know, linked to language, is you never have to fail again, which is a nice thing to know, isn't it? So I've studied NLP. For those of you that don't know me, I've studied something called NLP, which stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And I really wish they changed the name of it, because even that name's not very helpful to describe what it actually is. But it's basically use of language and some techniques to actually help people into change. So, and as part of that, there are a set of assumptions to actually kind of live by that make life a little easier and a bit more supportive. And one of those is there is no failure, only feedback. So that's where you know that, or you can know from now, that you'll never fail again. So if something doesn't quite go according to plan, sometimes we might say or think to ourselves that we failed at something because it didn't go according to plan. So I'd invite you to actually flip that a little bit, and just, if something doesn't go according to plan, just use that as a bit of feedback on how to do it differently next time. So it's just a much nicer way of actually thinking about when things don't go quite right. Does that help? Okay. Another thing you can do with language is, I've started doing this actually after some meditation exercises I did with somebody, but at the start of the day, I mean, some of you may already have this as a daily practice, so I'll ask you for your experiences in a second. But does anybody purposely set an intention for their day, of how they want their day to turn out? Is that anything anybody does? Sian's kind of Alia. Sort of. So is everybody a bit sort of?
I tend to just set myself goals that this is what I want to achieve in the day. So, but they tend to be quite functional rather than anything sort of spiritual or sort of about me, about self-maintenance. It's more, but I want this to do, this to do, and this to do.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And if you take this practice on of setting an intention every day, it could actually help you achieve those goals even more effectively. So most people, say most people, I'm being a bit too general, but a lot of people will just get up in the morning and just get on with the day and throw themselves into it without thinking about how they want their day to turn out. So this is part of something you can start to use as your self-talk as well, is I've started to find that if I set an intention of what I want to have, set an intention of how I want to show up for the day, I often find my day goes like that, rather than just leaving it to sort of chance. So for example, this morning, because I knew I'd got this workshop, it could be a small phrase, 1 word, 2 words, but I set the intention today that I wanted to be focused and to serve people. So I wanted to be focused, that I was prepared and ready for the workshop, and then also to serve people so that I give you guys the best experience that you can. So that means when I have that in my mind, that's how I approach everything during the day. And it usually supports me actually getting the outcome that I want for the day. So does anybody happy to share that the people that kind of said, yeah, I kind of do that, is that something similar to what you do? Alia, do you want to share?
I actually have a couple of questions related to
Okay,
this
sure.
because today hasn't been, I mean, I think I set out when I woke up, I went with not a good intention, in the sense that it's one of those days where it has been, I knew that I had a lot to do,
Mhm.
and I was like, sometimes you're not sure that you can do it. So I came in with that mindset. However, I'm still here, which is good. I passed through it. So it's quite nice to see that. But I'm just thinking I'm trying to get, because if you get into that mindset of starting a day with not such a good intention,
Yeah.
how do you actually succeed into getting yourself away from that? Because that's one of the major challenges that I'm facing.
Right.
And I've done elements of, like Sean said, I have specific, in my mind, it's more like tasks. So
Yeah.
I'm going to achieve specific things.
Mhm.
And a win would be achieving things not only on a work level, but also for myself or for the people around me.
Yeah.
So kind of having that mindset. I tried different things like having expressions, mottos. There's applications that actually bring up specific quotes, but sometimes because they're alternating, sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's just a bit not suitable for the moment. So
Yeah.
it's just finding the consistency of,
Yeah. And you can actually tie it into the tasks and goals that you've set yourself for the day, because I'm sure we've all had those horrible days where you've woken up wrong side of you've got out of bed the wrong side, you've stubbed your toe in the morning, you spilt your coffee, you get stuck in traffic on the way to work, and then the whole day just turns into a disaster because you started it off wrong. And so it's about catching yourself before you get caught up in that stuff that happens on a daily basis where we get caught in a role. And if you think about the tasks that you've got coming up ahead, you could ask yourself, who do I need to be, or how do I need to show up to actually achieve those tasks? Because if you started off in the morning of thinking, oh my God, I've got all this stuff to do, and you start off feeling overwhelmed, you'll carry on that overwhelmed feeling throughout the day and throughout all of the tasks. Whereas if, say, for example, you've got a lot to do, but if you said to yourself, today I'm going to have the intention of being energized and successful, then you carry that feeling with you, and it can actually help support you to achieve what you need to achieve. Does that make sense? Yeah. Does that help answer your question, Elia? Yeah. So it can,
yeah, it does.
yeah, that's great. Good. So it's like a lot of things, it can take a bit of practice to start with, but once you do start doing it, it is actually very effective because once you've started to have those thoughts, it's in the back of your mind for the rest of the day and can help influence how you actually show up for that day.
Can I just ask, is it like an affirmation or is that something different?
Affirmations are slightly different. An affirmation is telling you something that you are. So it's like, I am confident, I am successful. Whereas an intention is more giving you a direction to take things. And it's a good point, actually. Some people do struggle with affirmations because if you're telling yourself, I am confident, but you're not feeling confident, then it can kind of be a bit counteractive. Whereas an intention is more about just giving yourself a direction for the day rather than telling yourself you are that. It's just something to sort of incorporate into your day, if that makes sense. Does that help? Yeah. Anybody else got any questions? No? Okay, great. So that would be a good thing to do on a daily basis, is to start making an intention for the day. Okay. So any questions before I move on to the next strategy and area? No? Okay. The next big one is beliefs. So we can have self-sabotaging beliefs about ourselves, or sometimes they're called limiting beliefs. And I know this is a big thing that I struggled with for a long time. And beliefs can be quite often formed when we're children. That's usually before the age of 7. It can be later in childhood, even in teenagers, but quite commonly it's before the age of about 7 or 8. And the reason for that is, if you're not aware already, we have something called a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. So is that something people are familiar with? Yeah. Okay, those that may not be quite so sure. So your conscious mind is where you do all of your logical reasoning and you process everything that's happening in the moment. And your unconscious mind is where you hold all of your memories, your beliefs, any emotions, that kind of stuff. And what can happen before the age of about 7 or 8 is you don't have a conscious mind that's fully formed. And what your conscious mind would do is, if somebody tried to tell you something that you didn't believe or didn't think was quite true, your conscious mind would be able to reject that. It would be able to reason it and reject that. But before the age of 7 or 8, that's not in place. So our brains and our minds are like little sponges and just absorb everything that's told to you as being absolute fact. So if you've grown up in a household where you're possibly told that you're not good enough or you'll never achieve anything, that's probably going to be embedded as a belief unconsciously through most of your life. Unless you've got a way to actually deal with removing that. But that's how those beliefs can get set and hardwired into us. And there are ways that you can actually unlock that. So my grandmother, bless her, who's no longer with us, she was 103 when she left us, but she was actually way ahead of her game with all of this, because she had a fear of thunder and she didn't want to pass it on to her sons. So whenever it was thundering and lightning, she'd actually go and stand outside with her sons and make out that it was all nice and fun, just because she didn't want to install that belief in her children, which is great. She was having a good laugh at me there. So I had a belief for a very long time that I wasn't good enough, which I know came back to when I was a kid from stuff that happened at school. So is this sounding familiar to anybody, that they may have some beliefs that aren't really serving them and just get in the way? And it's not always as easy as rationally just knowing that it's not true and just getting rid of it. And because these are actually stored in your unconscious, it needs somebody to be able to help you get that out of your unconscious. Because often if we're trying to, so that we're trying, but if we're doing things to counteract that belief, we're often doing it consciously, which is just by willpower, which isn't always the way to actually get rid of beliefs. Some people can do it. I know a lady who just decided one day that she was going to be confident, and she was. And I mean, if I didn't know her when she wasn't confident, so I can't imagine her being anything else. But it just shows that it can be possible. But for a lot of people, it's a bit less easy. Okay. So one way to actually help with counteracting these beliefs, if you haven't got someone to help you dig into your unconscious and get them out, is start to examine the beliefs that you have about yourself that aren't helping you. So the ones that are getting in your way. So it could be something like you've already identified that you have a belief that you're not good enough, even though consciously you might know that it's not true. It's still kind of there in the background. Or that you're not worthy, or that you don't deserve things. So is anybody identifying with that they might have a belief that doesn't help them, gets in their way sometimes? Sometimes it might not always be obvious what that belief is, because it is so unconscious if it's been there for a long time. You might need to sort of sit down and think about what those beliefs are. So once you've identified what the beliefs might be, it can sometimes also be helpful to think about when they were formed, whether it was sometime in your childhood. And I know I had a huge fear of public speaking, and I know that went back to, because the memory just kept popping up kind of loud and clear, to a drama class I had in my middle school. And we had to do some improvisation, which was just taking me completely out of my comfort zone. I absolutely hated it. And stood up in front of the class to do this improvised thing, and I just froze. And I could just see the looks on all of the kids' faces sat in front of me, just looking at me like I was an idiot because I just froze. I stumbled some words out and then just went and sat down, really embarrassed. But I know my fear of standing up in front of people, I can tie it directly back to that moment. So it can sometimes be helpful to think back to when that belief was formed, and then you can start to unpick it, because you can see that it may not necessarily have been true. So has anybody here got a belief that they'd like to sort of get to the bottom of, or dig around and unroot a little bit, that they're happy to share with the group? No? Okay. So if you have, so you might have something that's popped into your head already. So if you just think about that belief and think back to when, the best way to do it is just to actually allow your mind to just present you with a memory. Just ask it to present you with a memory, and something may come to mind that was related to that belief and where it might have been formed. And because we're now grown up, looking back to when we were much younger, we can often look back and know that the incident that happened either wasn't our fault, or wasn't as bad as we thought at the time, or may not have been true. And then you can start to, with a rational adult's perspective, look at that belief and realise that it wasn't true. And then you can have a choice as to whether you want to carry on having that belief, or whether you want to do something different, just dispel that belief and carry on as if it wasn't there. Does that help at all? Yeah, no? Okay. So I think that's all I want to say on that. So is there anybody else who wants to share anything that comes up from that? Any questions that they've got? Yep. Julia. Just take yourself off mute. I think I'll see if I can take you off mute.
Okay, I've done it.
There you go.
I
So
mean, can it be just that simple? I remember very clearly when I was young, and I mean, there were two of us, my sister and I, and my sister was tall and slim and beautiful. She was older than me, and I was the short, dumpy one, and she just suddenly one day called me fatty and carried on calling me fatty until she died a few years ago.
Oh.
And I have always been fat, and I've always sabotaged myself when I've tried to change that pattern.
Okay. I mean, sometimes it's not as straightforward as just telling yourself not to believe it, but it's just working through that process. So what sort of age were you when your sister called you that?
About 9.
Okay. And that's
9 or
obviously
10.
Yeah, and that's usually around about the age where it's really quite hurtful, because you haven't, like I said, you haven't got the means to actually reject it so much, especially if it's from an older sibling. So if your sister was nice and slim and tall, as you said, do you believe what she said to you was true, looking back at that age?
Oh yes, yeah, yes, because I was, I wasn't fat then, but I was stockier than she was, shall I say, and
Yeah.
a different sort of basic shape.
And I think that can often be compounded if we start comparing ourselves to other people. So compared to her, that may have been true, but compared to somebody else who had a similar figure to yours at that age, it probably wouldn't have been true. Okay. So do you think there was a reason that she said that to you, knowing what siblings can be like?
Well, yes, because she was the one who was always, she was 5 years older than me. She was perhaps the more cleverer than me. There was always that she and I, anyway, there was a divide in the family, and I was, the practical one. She was the clever ones with the brains, and I just haven't got the same abilities as her.
Okay. Yeah, and everybody's got different and got their own things to bring to the world, basically. So feel free to reject this if this isn't true or doesn't fit with your memory of it. But do you think she was just saying that to you to be mean at the time? Or do you think?
Not totally.
Okay. So what do you think her intention of saying that might have been?
I think she probably believed it herself at the time.
Really? Okay. So do you think she said it to you to get a reaction out of you?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And because I'm just trying to think back in, if I put myself in the shoes of a 15-year-old, if I was going to say something like that to somebody, it probably wouldn't be to have a good intention to say something like that, because it's not a nice thing to say, is it?
No.
So if you,
Well,
so as an adult looking back, knowing that her intention was to get a reaction out of you and just to say something mean to you, does that make it less true?
no, I don't think so, actually. I mean, it's just something that went on and on in life. It's just so much as when, after she had died, she died quite young, and I met some of her in-law family, as I called them, and one of them said to me, well, I know who you are, but I don't know what your name is, because she always referred to me as Fatty.
That's not a fair thing to do at all, is it?
No, so I was in my probably 30s or something. Anyway, so it's sort of been there. It's just like I've got a halo which says Fatty all the way around.
And sometimes if something like that is drummed into us, we can actually end up fulfilling that prophecy itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you think, looking back to when you were a child, that she was saying it to be mean, and think of it from that point of view, it doesn't mean that's how you have to be sort of going forward. So you actually have a choice in whether you carry on being that name and living out that belief that somebody else had about you, or you can choose to do something different.
Yes, I mean, yes, I can see exactly what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but it's never been put to me like that before. I've never sort of unpicked this particular comment.
Yeah. So has that given you a slightly different perspective on it? Now you haven't.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I might not be, by the time I'm 70 in the summer, maybe I might not be such a fatty.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Has that helped?
It does, thank you. Yes, yeah. I mean, it just sounds very sort of, I don't know, superficial in a way is what I was going to say. Yes, but it's not.
No, absolutely. And I think when we are told stuff like that when we are children, it has a much bigger impact than we think. And like I said, because it kind of gets buried in your unconscious mind, it just sits there and plays over and over, and you feel like you haven't got much control over it. So that's why it does help to kind of shine a light on the reason that it happened in the first place. That gives you a different perspective, so you can then sort of choose to let go of it and do something different.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Alia, so you got your hand up.
I wanted to ask you if, because it's at one point you have the belief, you deconstruct the belief, but you also mentioned the fact that you choose if you want to continue believing it or having it with you or not.
Yeah.
Can you choose to not believe in it, but also because it's part of, in a way, who we are, in the sense of up until this moment when I'm let's say deconstructing the belief, it's always stuck with me. Can I still have it and just not let it weigh me down?
Yeah, absolutely. I see what you're saying. Something can still stay there as a belief. And as I said before, when we were talking about self-talk, sometimes it's just bringing it into our awareness can then give us a bit of control back, and then we have a choice about whether we want to do that thing or not. So sometimes you can still have that belief somewhere sitting in your mind and floating about, but because you've then uncovered it as it being either untrue or not helpful, that then puts you in a position where you've got a choice about whether you want to let that belief take over and take control and guide your behavior or your thoughts or your feelings, or you can choose to do something different.
And my second one is, thank you, Julia, actually, for sharing that, because it's something that when we have people that tell us specific things, either about us, well, technically making comments on us, how do you not carry that forward or stop it from being ingrained in your subconscious?
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
yeah, it does definitely.
Because sometimes you acknowledge it, but it's just,
Mhm.
it sticks.
There's a couple of things there. Firstly, it's, you can ask yourself, is that actually true, or is that just somebody's opinion? Because somebody's opinion isn't necessarily fact. That's just what they think. So you can challenge it logically from your own point of view. And secondly, as we discussed with Julia, it's understanding what somebody's intention is of saying that. So if their intention is to hurt you, do you harm, mine you, something like that, you can then reject it because you know that opinion has come from a not nice place to do something against you. So you can choose to rise above it if you want to. Does that answer your question? I'll come to you in a second, Sian, thanks. Does that answer your question, Alia? Does that help?
Yes. What happens if people tend to say, oh, it's just how they are?
What if
Because
the person says that's just how they are?
yes, so that it can give you a similar example. It's just like my partner's family keeps on making very, and it's not only towards me, it's towards their own kids. In the end, very, it's hurtful comments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one, they developed this nickname for me being tofu because I got sick during the trips that so meaning that I'm weak.
Okay.
And it's like the family altogether. I brought it up and the people, so to my partner, and he goes, oh no, this is just how they are. And it's a bit like, no.
No. So have you actually spoken to these people, the family members yourself, to say that you find it quite hurtful? Or
I've tried to,
okay.
but it's just a bit of a, how do you approach this element?
Yeah. Not so easy one when you're dealing with family members, because obviously you don't want to fall out with them, but I would just repeat it a few times until they got the point that it's quite a hurtful thing to say. I'm guessing if when you brought it up before, they might have just laughed it off and said they were only joking or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd try, is there a family member who you could speak to one-to-one alone and not in front of everybody else who might listen to you, that you could have a quiet word with?
I think it's so ingrained in the whole family dynamic that it's really tricky too. So I'm just trying to figure out ways in which I can cope with it in such a way that doesn't affect me. And also, if there is a chance to lift somebody up because they've heard it longer than I have, to try to do that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, the other way to look at it is just change how you think about it in your own head, and maybe even just think that they're using it as an affectionate nickname to you and not to be mean. That might be another way of doing it if you don't feel capable or don't feel that you could tackle people directly about it. Does that help? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Sian, you had your hand up.
Just what Julia said touched a bit of a raw nerve for me, and I had a similar situation with my sister, except I was the older sister. But we were fortunate, I don't know how this happened, I think maybe through our family circumstances, that we were able to have a heart-to-heart when we were older, and we had the chance to see it from each other's perspective. And I was able to admit that the reason I was unkind to my sister was because of the expectations that my parents placed on me and not on her. And ultimately, I was jealous of her because she had a lot more freedom. She seemed to be indulged more than I was. I had to be the grown-up, sensible one that did really well at school. And my sister seemed to have looser boundaries than I did. And the only way that I knew how to hurt my sister was comment about her weight.
Mm-hmm.
And as an adult, I'm ashamed of that now. But similarly, my sister responded by saying her behaviours. So the fact that she would tease me about certain things, how she would invade my privacy, was because she was fed up being compared to me, but I didn't realise she was. And it wasn't just with our own parents, it was teachers at school. And I guess now as an adult, one of the things that I'm kind of learning, because I'm still learning, is that I sort of see things from my perspective without, it's like you said about somebody's opinion isn't necessarily fact.
Yeah.
And it's only really now really understanding that the way people are behaving towards me isn't necessarily about me.
Mm-hmm.
So I am ashamed that I spoke to my sister like that, but that was the reason why. I think we were very lucky that we were able to share that with each other. And I learned something as well. I thought my sister didn't care. I thought she didn't care about me and how I was at school and my achievements, and she did. So it was a bit of a wake-up call for me. So I don't know if that sort of explains, but it really hit a raw nerve with me, Julia, because I had the chance to actually understand how it affected my sister and vice versa.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything, Julia? I don't think I can actually take you off mute, Julia.
I can do it now.
Oh,
I think I've done it now. But actually that was really useful, Sian, because my sister was older than me, and all the things you were saying about that your sister was more indulged, etc. It was the other way, because my sister was much more indulged than I was. Maybe because they thought, my parents were elderly, maybe they thought she was going to be the only one or something. But anyway, it was just the reverse with us. So that's quite interesting.
But my sister thought the same as you, though, Julia. She thought that I was the one that was indulged because I was the one that was praised for schoolwork, because my teachers thought I was the best. I was a model student. And my sister saw that I had more privileges than she did. But actually, we were both, I thought my sister got away with a lot more than I did. But my sister thought I was the one that was the favoured child. And in actual fact, it was the other way around. It was just our perceptions. So that's why it's hit. It's almost like a mirror image from what you're describing. I can really relate to. But I think because my parents divorced, my sister and I and it was quite messy. My sister and I just had each other. Right. And that's kind of what we were put in a difficult position one day. And it just all, I wouldn't recommend that for anybody, but it worked for us. And it was really eye-opening that she thought what you've just described, what you've just said, is what she said to me as well. And that didn't make any sense to me at all. But she thought I was the favourite one. And I thought it was the other way around.
It's interesting. We do get stuck in our own positions, and we often especially as children, we can't see things from other people's perspective quite as easily. So it's just unfortunate you can't have that conversation with her now, Julia. But
that's right. Yeah.
I hope that's given you some comfort, and thank you both for sharing that.
Thank you. Yes, okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, anybody else want to say anything? Or got any questions or anything they want to raise around that area of beliefs? No? Okay, great.
Can I just say I'm going to have to slope off in a
few
minutes, but thank you very much for, it's been an interesting session, and I'll try and find some more with you again.
Yeah, I run these once a month, so the next one will be the 10th of February.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for coming, Julia.
Thank you, everybody.
Great. Okay, so on to the next thing is we're going to be discussing to do with self-sabotage is about where you put your focus. So this can be quite key as well. And quite often we end up focusing on what we don't want to happen. So we say we don't want to get ill, or you don't want to get made redundant, or there's lots of don'ts that we can often say to ourselves of what we don't want to happen. And part of the problem with that is we can end up actually creating that because we're spending so much of our time and energy focusing on it. And I don't know who of you, some of you may have heard of Tony Robbins. Anybody heard of Tony Robbins? He's probably the most famous personal growth guru in the world, worth billions. But one of his quotes is, where focus goes, energy flows. So if you're focusing on something not turning out right, that's where all of your energy will go. And quite often, if that's focusing on what you don't want to happen, that can be quite tiring sometimes. So, and I mentioned before that we have this thing called the RAS, the reticular activating system. And like I said, it's looking for common things to support where you're thinking and where your focus is going. So, and it's also looking for evidence. So if you're focusing on, I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, then your RAS is actually going to be looking for evidence that you're not good enough or that you can't do it, rather than to the contrary, because that's just the way that our brains are hardwired to work. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. And so what I'd invite you to do is start to focus on what you do want out of life. And that might be a bit of a switch for some people to do, because we can sometimes get so entrenched in thinking the opposite, that thinking how you want things to turn out can often be a bit of a challenge. And I know some people, I'm not saying anybody on the call does, but some people can often get stuck in the trap of imagining the worst that could happen, so that if anything better happens, that's actually a bonus. And I think that's not the best, not a very helpful way to live, because if you're having to live in negative happening all the time, I think that robs people of a lot of joy and happiness, because it stops you looking forward to things because you're always dreading things. Does that resonate with anybody? Because I know that's what I used to do. Yeah. Okay. And this is also where goal setting can help, because if you're focusing on goals of what you want to achieve, then you're automatically starting to focus on what you do want out of life, if that makes sense. So does anybody here do any goal setting at the moment? Yeah. So at least one of you. Yeah, and Alia. So by doing that, do you find that, so Alia and Shital, does that actually help you focus on where you want to get to in life rather than anything else? Or anything you want to share about that?
I think my problem is that I always set goals for my work as opposed to my personal life, and my personal life's goals just get trumped out of the picture. So
yes, that can be a problem sometimes. So do you ever think about setting goals in your personal life? So you set them and then just nothing happens with them?
I had a very nice list of 30 things that I wanted to do last year.
Okay.
And you know how things happen.
Well, yeah, last year was a bit of an exception.
Yeah. I need to recenter and focus on specific things that I want to achieve within, myself, and on a personal level. I think that's
yeah, and I know there are challenges around at the moment with lockdown in doing some of that stuff, but at the moment I think it's still worthwhile setting those goals and thinking about it, because there will be a point when we come out of what's going on and we can get on with life properly again, hopefully. Thank you. Sheetad, was there anything you wanted to share?
Well, I find doing goals less easy. I have the goals, I know what I want. I know I've had a conversation with you in the past where a dream without action is just a dream. I'm getting so much better, and my goals just need to be written down, because when you write things down, it provides more clarity. Yeah. You can kind of amend it, and you, because in your mind it's more imagining, and sometimes you can actually I feel like I've overwhelmed myself by having too many goals, but it's all there. When I think if I just put it on paper, it's out there, it's on there, and it's in sight. And in the past, I have written goals, but put it like
like Alia said, put it on a list, but then it's somewhere and I don't see it. So I just want to get to that stage where I need to be specific with my goals and have it in view, because I think if it's in view, you're seeing it every day and you're like, oh yeah, like it can pull you back on track, rather than, you know, are you finding something like 5 years later and looking and think, oh, I've done 3 of those things, like,
Yeah.
you know. And
I was having a similar conversation with somebody at the weekend. She said she was very good at thinking ahead for the next week or 2 weeks. And then she'd got some really big goals, but then had nothing in between what happened in the next week or so and then getting to that big goal in a couple of years' time. So a lot of, and sometimes the goal, I don't know if this is with you, Sheetal, but sometimes the goal's a bit big that you don't quite know how you're going to get there.
I think of the outcome, but I don't break it down, and that's where I know I need to work on it, because I know what I want. It's just breaking it down so that it looks more achievable. Whereas I think about the outcome, but I don't break it down, and all of a sudden I just think, oh my God, it is too much to do. When really, if you just broke it down, what you could achieve in like a month, 3 months time is probably quite a lot if you're focused.
Yeah. And this is slightly off topic, but I can give you a very 5-minute snapshot on how to write goals and make it seem a bit more achievable. I can't remember if I've talked to you about this before or not, Sheetal, but so if the big goal that you've got is what I'd call an outcome goal. So you start off with an outcome goal, the big picture of where you want to get to. So whether that's, I'll just use a simple example of going on an amazing holiday. So maybe you take a month off and you travel the world or something. So that would be your outcome goal, is to go and travel the world. Then I would then break that down into what I would call means goals, which are the things that you have to have in place to achieve that bigger goal. So that could be things like booking a ticket, making sure your passport's up to date, saving some money so that you can pay for the flights and you've got spending money, that you book the time off work, however you need to do that. So just a list of like big picture goals that you need to achieve the big goal. Then the next step down is what I would call process goals. So they're the specific tasks that you need to do to achieve those means goals. So if we take, for example, the fact that you need to save money to achieve that, to go on this holiday, it's what would you need to do? Do you need to save £100 a month towards that? Or if that's not possible, do you need to have a clear out of all of your junk and stick a load of stuff on eBay to sell? But just sort of have a brainstorm of ideas of how you could achieve that means goal with a process goal. So, and all of that can help uncover other things that you haven't thought about in terms of what you need to achieve that goal, or things that might get in your way. And then once you've brainstormed all of that, so you've got your outcome goals, you've got your means goals, and then your process goals for each of the means goals. And then you can start to add dates into that of when you need to achieve that. So if your trip to go around the world was in 18 months' time, you could then work back as to when you needed all of those to be in place to actually achieve it. Because otherwise, if you've just got the outcome goal of you want to go on this holiday, it doesn't give you anything tangible of the steps that you need to go to, or when you need to actually do it by to actually achieve that. So, and that's how goals can sometimes drift, because you haven't got anything tangible of the steps that you need to go through. So, I did that in 3 minutes. There we go. 3-minute whistle stop tour through goal setting. So does that help, that bit that's missing for you, Sheetal? Yeah, okay, good. Like I said, slightly off topic, but I just thought it might help. Okay, so back to focusing on what we want. And so, yeah, so we just talked about goal setting. And even if you don't want to do anything as formal as goal setting, even just start to imagine what it is you want to get out of life, because sometimes we don't actually give ourselves the freedom to do that, because we're so focused on what happens day to day. We don't often give ourselves a chance to look up from what's going on in front of us and actually see where you want to get to. So even just sitting down and daydreaming, or even just writing a list of some people write a bucket list, so things that you want to achieve, even just doing that can actually help lift you out of that normal way of thinking to actually focus on where you want to get to, and out of the humdrum stuff that happens in our daily lives. And then once you've got an idea of when you want to get to, it's then making that familiar, so it becomes part of your normal thinking and day-to-day musings, that kind of stuff. So you could then do things like even make a vision board. I know some people do that. Or if you have something like a daily meditation practice, you can make visualizing having that goal part of your meditation practice. Or we talked briefly about affirmations. You could even make it an affirmation if you do that on a daily basis. But just anything that you need to do to actually make that goal of what you do want familiar to you, so that you're visualizing what happened in your mind. Because like I said, your RAS will kick in and start helping you work towards that, whether you know it consciously or not. And if there's anything crops up when you're doing that that presents itself as a bit of a barrier or an obstacle for you getting what you want, I give these 2 questions to my clients quite a lot. So if you're stuck with anything, these 2 questions can start helping you shift and move into action. So if you're not sure what to do, either ask yourself, how can I make this happen? Or how can I change this? And the answers to those questions will give you the action that you need to take to get yourself unstuck or past this obstacle that's come up. So like I was just saying, if you wanted to go on a trip around the world and money was a bit of an issue, you weren't quite sure where to find that, you could start asking yourself how you could make that happen. And whether it's get a part-time job or sell belongings or start making things to sell, there's lots of different options as to how you could do that. So it just starts to open things up for you a little bit. Okay. Any questions on that, or is that straightforward, just about focusing on what you want? Okay. So I'm sure you're sick of me droning on a little bit. So I'm just going to put you into, so if there's no more questions about that, I'll just put you into a breakout room. Yeah. Okay. So there's a bit more to give you after this, but I just want to put you into breakout rooms now, just to give you a chance to have a chat with each other. And I'd like you to share any insights or anything that you're going to take away so far from what we've talked about, and just sort of give 1 or 2 things to each other that of insights or takeaways that you're getting. So I will put you into breakout rooms. I'll give you 5 minutes. So there's another group of 3 and 2 groups of 2 again. So I'll make it 6 minutes. So then you've the group of 3, you've got 2 minutes to share with each other. So is everybody clear on that? Yep. Okay, I'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back, everybody. So anybody happy to share anything they got as a, why are you laughing, Sheetal? Anybody happy to share any insights they've got or any actions they're going to take away so far from today?
I'm certainly going to take the idea of the intention, that concept of setting intention. That's why I wanted just to clarify with affirmation.
Right.
Because there's times I thought, well, why should I be confident today? I don't feel it. Rather than, or you are beautiful. I thought, well, actually, that sounds a bit, I don't, no, I'm not, as I've got spots and all sorts and acne. And I thought, but this idea of today, I want to listen more than speak or be quieter, or, that's something I'm certainly going to take away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's more about how you want to approach things than you are that thing. So it's not quite as definite as you telling yourself, I am confident, I am beautiful, or whatever. So it's just an approach. Yeah, great. Anybody else got anything they want to share? No? Okay. Sorry, Sue, did you might just need to take yourself off mute? Right, if I press the button, it might pop up to ask you to, there we go.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Yeah, I was just talking to Sheetal about, like, every morning I do my meditation and then, like, my intentions are good, but using the wrong words, like, as soon as I go to work, then I'm surrounded by negativity.
Yeah.
But then I should change it. Like she just said, you need to say you want to be positive instead of negative. But sometimes you just can't help it because your intentions are to be, like, all calm and everything. But because of the situation at the moment with this COVID and that, everyone at work's got that anxiety and fear. So I'm surrounded by that, and I'm trying to come out of it.
Yeah.
But it's so hard when you're surrounded by them, and the only way is to sort of walk away. I mean, although I work by myself, but it's sort of, you can't help it. You're in that situation where they're telling you all, everything's that negative, and then you're trying to sort of explain to them that there's nothing you can do about it, but then it doesn't get you anywhere, and then you feel like the way they feel.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you come out from that?
Yeah, and it's a good question actually, because it is quite tricky at the moment, because there is so much fear around there. I've stopped watching the daily news because I just find it just spreads fear and brings you down. So my advice would be to switch the news off for a start. Secondly, you can decide whether you want to let people affect your mood or not. It sometimes can be that straightforward, and just choose to ignore what they're saying. Because you said sometimes that just walking away might be the best answer. Sometimes just avoiding people or just not engaging in conversation. And I know that's not the most helpful thing to say, because there's probably less people that we're talking to at the moment anyway. So reducing that even further is probably not a nice thought. But sometimes it can be a bit of a waste of time actually trying to convince people to think differently as well. And sometimes you can just nod and agree, but choose not to actually let it impact on you at all.
Yeah.
I know this is something I've shared with Sheetal before, that sometimes a good way of actually getting out of a conversation, she knows what I'm going to say, a good way of getting out of a conversation without actually being rude to somebody is, if they're telling you something you don't want to hear, is just nod at them and go, good. Then they don't know what to say to you, because you're not being rude to them. But I've used that quite a few times with people, and it's actually quite effective. So that could be a way out of it, because it just confuses people.
Yeah, I'll try that tomorrow then.
Yeah. The other thing to remember as well, sometimes it can be helpful to remember that what you can control and what you can't control. Mm-hmm. And we're in control of ourselves, so we control what we listen to, what we hear, how we behave, that kind of thing. But other people's behaviour we can't have any control over. So just kind of letting go of other people's opinions and just leaving them with that person, and choosing not to absorb it or take it on board, can be helpful sometimes as well.
Yeah.
But there's no easy answer with some of the negative Nellies that are around at the moment, but I think ignoring them is probably the best option.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that help, Suda?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true.
That's great. Thanks.
It's like you know it, but you still...
Especially when you're surrounded by people like that, it can be less easy to just switch off to it. But we just do our best, basically.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, just wanted to finish off one thing. Sorry, has anybody else got any questions or anything they want to share? One thing just to finish off that, focusing on what you want. I may have shared this with a couple of you already, but if you've got a specific event coming up, so say you've got an interview or a speech to do, or even going on a date or something, there's an audio that I've recorded that can help you focus on the outcome that you want. So it's kind of a visualization / hypnosis track that, if you have got a specific thing coming up, it'll get you to visualize that and visualize it turning out as you want to. So I'm just going to put in the chat the link to that. So feel free to copy that and go to that link to whenever you need it. And if you've got something like an interview coming up, it can be really helpful if you listen to that every day for a week or so, something like that, leading up to the event. It'll really help put into your mind what you want to focus on, what you want to happen. And I have had feedback from previous clients that it's actually worked out quite effectively for them. There's one girl in particular, she'd got a presentation to do that she wasn't feeling particularly confident about. And she messaged me the next day saying she was really excited about it because it actually turned out exactly as she'd visualized it turning out. So it does work. So please feel free to use that if you want to. Okay. So the last strategy that I'm going to talk about is anxiety. Well, it's not a strategy. The last area of self-sabotage I'm going to talk about is anxiety, and how you can actually deal with that. Because often if we get ourselves into an anxious state, common sense goes out the window and we just get into a bit of a spiral down, and that things aren't going to go well. And if you break anxiety down to its lowest common denominator, it's actually just fear of the future. So if you think about any time that you've been anxious, and it links in with focusing on what you want as well, because if you're being anxious about something, it's the fear of it turning out not the way you want it to. So that's it at its lowest common denominator. And one question that I'd like you to ask yourself is, where does the future exist? So I know Sian's thought about this one before because we've had this conversation, but where does the future actually exist if you think about it? Anybody got any suggestions? Nope.
Somewhere in space.
Yeah, it may well be.
Far away.
Yeah, absolutely. Sian, do you want to share?
It only exists in our mind, because it's not real. It's not happened, so it's not real.
Yeah, absolutely. So the future only ever exists in our imagination. So it doesn't exist anywhere else. And our imaginations are very powerful things. So it can create all sorts of things that are going to happen. So that's basically what's happening when you're being anxious, is you're literally just imagining what might go wrong. So again, bringing it back to focusing on what you want to happen, you can choose to think something different. And that's where the audio that I've just shared can come into play as well, because you can start shifting what it is you're being anxious about into something positive instead. So has anybody got any thoughts about that? Is that a bit of a revelation to some people that the future doesn't exist?
It's really helped me tenfold. It's really just, it's been one of the most empowering things, because I've just always imagined the worst. As I said to Anne in our breakout room, there isn't a glass because somebody's pinched it. So it's just having that, and I've shared it a number of times with some of the friends, and it's almost been like this sort of light bulb moment, this epiphany, where they've suddenly gone, oh my goodness, of course it's not real. But you're imagining this is going to happen, so it must happen like this. And for me, anyway, it's certainly made me much calmer. And I've had 2 people actually say to me, has something happened to you? Because you're very different. And one is somebody that I used to work beside. I worked beside her for a long time. She's known me for 10 years. Actually said, has something happened? You're very different. I like it. So, so it's
like
clearly working.
Yeah, that's really good. But yeah, sometimes I think when somebody first explained that concept to me, it was a bit kind of like, oh yeah, the future doesn't actually exist anywhere, does it? But it's interesting. Like I said, our imaginations are really powerful, and we can create all sorts of scenarios about how things might go wrong in the future, but none of it is actually real, and none of it has to happen. And like I said, if you start focusing on what you want to happen instead, your mind and your unconscious mind will actually start supporting you in getting that, because that's where your energy is going, where your focus is going. But like I said, that audio that I've just pasted into the chat will help very much with that. So anybody else got anything they want to say about anxiety now that we've blown what the future is out of the water? No? Okay.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of overthinking, overanalyzing. If I'm going to have a conversation with somebody, playing it out in my head, what it's going to be like, what I'm going to say, what they're going to say, how it's going to react. And yeah, that does make me realize that it's all nonsense, because we've got no idea what it's going to be like, because sometimes you don't even know what their question's going to be. So how can you come up with an answer when they haven't asked you a question? So maybe it'll stop the lying awake at night going over the conversations.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with preparing for things, so questions that might get asked, but it's when you start catastrophizing about it all being dreadful that the problems can start. So there's a difference between being prepared and imagining the worst.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you're constantly living in that place of imagining the worst, then it does tend to rob you of the happiness and joy that I mentioned before, that you'd lose the ability to be able to look forward to things. And even just to talk a little bit about the effect that anxiety can have on you as well. I'm sure whether you've studied it or looked into it or not, you're aware that there's a connection between our minds and our bodies as well. And I'm sure if you've experienced anxiety, you know the physical aspects of that you can get sweaty palms, or your pulse is racing, or you get a knot in your stomach, or headaches even. So there's all sorts of things which isn't helpful for you if it's starting to have a physical impact on you. So even from a health point of view, if there are ways that you can get yourself out of experiencing anxiety, it's a good thing. But like I said, it ties in very closely with focusing on what you want to happen instead, and using your imagination to actually create that positive thought instead. Okay, does that help? Good. Any other questions? Or anything else that anybody wants to share? Okay, great. So like I said, this isn't a sales pitch, but if anybody does want to actually have a conversation with me afterwards, either to talk about anything that's cropped up for you on tonight's call, or even to talk about what it might be like to work with me, then please feel free to book yourself in. I offer everybody a free hour's breakthrough call with me, so we can talk about anything you want to, really. But if there's anything that's particularly bothering you, I'm happy to spend the hour just talking about how you can do something differently, or breaking through any beliefs that you might have. So feel free to please feel free to use that if you want to. So I just want to ask anybody if they're happy to share anything they want to take away from tonight. What's their biggest takeaway? Anybody got anything? I know.
I think that the language thing is really useful, because I am becoming more aware of what I say, but you still would say, oh, that was bad. It's habit.
Yeah.
And getting into the better practice of using the more positive terminology helps me and helps the people that are listening as well. So that's a really big thing for me. It's the positive language.
Yeah, great, good stuff. Anybody? We're keeping Sheetal up. Anything else that anybody wants to share that they're going to take away with them, or an action they've decided they're going to take with them, or to implement afterwards rather? Alia, I'll come to you in a second, Sian. So Alia.
I think for me, it's more so like understanding the fact that there's all of these levels of words and thoughts, beliefs, and then how those elements actually affect my goal setting, my personal goal setting that I kind of want to improve on. And also, well, to be honest, last workshop with anxiety actually helped a lot, and it's familiar. It's good to kind of rethink and reanalyze my approach towards anxiety, so everything kind of gets hand in hand. So yeah. I just wanted to thank you for the session, because it's really useful.
No, that's great. That's what it's here for. So I'm glad you got something out of it. That's good. Thank you. And Sian.
I think combining or trying to link the idea of where focus goes, energy flows, with my daily intention. And I think considering as well, this is one I'm still kind of finding more challenging to address, is that idea that failure is just feedback. So I'd like to be able to consider my intention each day helps to work towards or away from, depending on how you want to look at it, that embracing that this sense of, well, it didn't go the way I wanted it, but actually that's just feedback. That's not the end of the world. That doesn't mean you're never going to be able to achieve it. So yeah, sort of trying to interweave that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this analogy is made quite a lot, but I think it was Edison who invented the light bulb, and it took him something like 1,000 attempts before he actually came up with the working model of the light bulb. So if he'd attempt one, if that hadn't worked and he decided that he was a failure, I'm sure somebody else would have invented it, but he wouldn't have invented the light bulb. So we just used the ones that didn't work as knowledge to know how to not do it next time. So that's a good way of looking at it. But yeah, that's all really positive. That's great. Anybody else want to share anything? No. Okay. So we're going to finish a couple of minutes early. If nobody's got anything else, any burning questions they want to ask me. No? Okay. So I mentioned I've been recording this session, so I'll be sending out a copy of the recording to you all, so you've got that to keep if you want to refer back to anything. If you've scribbled notes and you just wanted to check on something, you've got that there for you. But like I said, otherwise I run these events every month, and you're very welcome to come back to another one. And even if it's on the same topic, I think, as Sian will probably attest, because Sian's been to the ones I've done so far, even if it's on the same topic, something you can still, sometimes you can still take something slightly different away from it. Or you may want to come back and ask me some questions about something, which is fine too. It'd be great to see you all. So thank you for all of your time, attention and input tonight. It's been really lovely to spend some time with you. And I hope to see you all again soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.